think something simple I can think of is walking down the street with headphones on. I don't do that back home because I will just get the looks. That's like, those rules are intimidating, I think, because if you go past them, then you're not normal anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, you should respect that. But still, there's still something very attractive in breaking the rules. Because, like as you said before, your parents were very different from like other parents in Palestine. But at the same time, they like something like they didn't like religion, they didn't do religion study. But it's exactly because they didn't do so you wanted to explore that part. So it's really,
I think the difference, though, in that is my parents wouldn't mind if I wanted to. I think a lot of parents, if they're religious and their kids are not religious anymore, there's going to be like spanking involved or something. But yeah, my parents, like I said, like I was never afraid of exploring different things because I felt like as long as I'm being clear with them, they don't really care. So that's why I think I have that privilege of like thinking out of the box, but then other people have to overcome that privilege by going home and talking to their, like you said, like talking to your parents, just simply talking to them about different ideas starts making certain conversations. And I obviously have that, like now, at the beginning of school, I never really talked to my parents about anything I learned, but I just went home this winter break, and there, I think that was the highest number of arguments we've ever been through, about different things like politics or economics or society. Because I reached the point where I don't know if I would call myself even an honor. Like, I don't believe in systems anymore, but I don't want to be labeled as anything.
as anarchist.
Yeah, I don't think I am, because I think some type of governance is important, but I also gave up on believing that some type of governance works. Especially in a globalized system where every single other government has power over you, so yeah. So my ideas are like my parents now like sort of believe that a system could work if it's under the right conditions, and I think they probably believe that, you know, some European countries are doing well, or the US was doing well at some point, but they're still that like believe in the process, like they follow the elections and they think it's important, blah blah blah. For me, it's like who cares?
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's your reaction?
Yeah,
to
so
the last
I was there during the elections in the US, or a bit. Wait, it was a bit after. So Trump was already elected, but Obama was still in as the president, and we would talk about that. And then my dad would just say like things that I would never hear at Earlham, like Trump is a businessman, he's gonna lead their country and he's gonna make it develop, like prosper from an economic perspective.
Yeah, I hear like many comments like that in Vietnam actually.
Yeah, and it's like, yeah, but the US is not a business, and like listen to what he's saying. Like simple things like that with my dad was like, yeah, I guess the world isn't just Earlham. That was my first thought. I guess the world isn't just Earlham, because here it feels like you're in a bubble. If you say the right things, no one's gonna challenge you, and if you say the wrong things, you suddenly become the black sheep, kind of. Like you become that person that should be thrown on the side, no one talk to him, or if you want to talk to him, just educate him and that's it. You become, like, it's as if you can't make mistakes at Earlham. There's this belief that everyone is pure here and everyone should be pure, and I think that's messed up. That's how I was talking about liberalism, like, it's sort of this idea that you're pure and you want to make everything pure around you. You want to help.
Pure, what do you mean by
pure? Like there's no mistakes in what you're saying, in the way you're behaving, and if there are, you're working on it. Just like how David Dawson said once, I'm a recovering racist. I think a lot of people in liberal areas in the US, especially white liberal areas, I think, they believe in this purity. And it's, of course, in other communities too. It's not just white, but I notice it mostly in white. It's this idea of, like, pure, like you're pure, and you have to make everything around you pure. And if you see someone who says something that doesn't go with your beliefs, how righteous their beliefs are, I don't care, but they start treating the other person as if they're not human, and label them as one word. Like, it's again the power of labeling people that I dislike, I think.
I totally agree.
Because whether you're liberal or conservative, when you label people, you're reducing them to a certain thing. Unless we're talking about like someone who's messed up, then I'm fine with them being labeled. But yeah, but I think it's the power of labeling that I see at Erlum, and maybe not as much outside when we talk to our parents. That's how conversations, I think, with parents are important, definitely.
But still, labeling is kind of an inevitable part of politics, of any political process, right? Because, I don't know, when you witness political rhetoric, you realize that a lot of arguments are simplified to the extent that it divides our society into two groups, or it's like two opposing groups to some extent. But I still think that for you, politics still matters because you are in the forefront of the anti-racism movement, or if I observe.
Yeah, so let me just go through that. So I want to say, okay, so I'm not actually interested in politics. I've never taken a class in politics even, and I don't want to be a politician ever because I think politics is why people are labeled. I think like politics and governance is what leads a few people governing the majority of people because they have the power suddenly now, or they have the support of the people who have the power, which are corporations in the US, big corporations. And yeah, governance needs to label people, so it starts labeling people because that's how you rule people. You put them into groups and you separate them and you start getting at them one by one. And you, I think one of the things, like you can see that in the US when it first became a country, or when they first moved here, the white Europeans with and then with slaves with them, is that there's the rich white people, there's lower class white people, and there's the slaves.
The hierarchy.
Yeah, and then in order to not make the lower class white people be in solidarity with the black people, they gave the lower class white people money and they gave them slaves. And here you go, the problem is solved. Land, they gave them land. That was most of it. And the black people had nothing. So that's how you label people, and you start separating them. Instead of looking at them from a classist perspective, the government was malicious enough to think about them from a race perspective. I mean, from the first place, they brought them as slaves. They weren't even being treated as human. So yeah, you label people and you separate them. So that's why I'm not concerned with how politics works, or like, I think a clearer way is that I'm not interested in being an administrator or in a power position in the future. That's not something I want to perfect or master, because a lot of people try to do that here. Nothing wrong with that. That's their choice. But
it's simply not your individual choice.
Yeah. So I'm not interested in governance, but I'm interested in, like, let's say if I study politics, why would I study it? I'm studying it to learn how to deconstruct it, to negate it. So yeah, that's why, but why I fight, or like why I always want to do something, is because I've been personally affected, and I've seen people personally affected by power and oppression, and that's why I push back, because I think if I don't, then I'm not even guaranteeing my children a good future or my family a good future. I think people know it's urgent back home. That's why everyone is political. And even if you don't want to be political, the world makes you political. Like a simple question here anywhere in the US, where are you from? I'm from Palestine. It's either a person who will think I'm from Pakistan and start viewing me in a certain way, or they think I'm from Palestine, they view me in a similar way as well. Like, as a Muslim terrorist, blah, blah, blah. Or they start asking me about Israel, Palestine, and I tell them small details or little things, and then they start preaching to me about the conflict and how it should be resolved. So even if you're not interested in politics, it's already imposed upon you as a child in Palestine, because it's your life, it's affecting you every day. It's like living in a prison, kind of. So that's why sometimes I try to avoid that by saying, oh, I'm not from Palestine. Like, someone asks me where you're from, I say Jerusalem, and then they start thinking about Jesus. That's a way of avoiding politics. But yeah, I'm not really interested in politics. I'm interested in having a decent life, I guess, and making sure people around me have a decent life.
From a more individualized approach rather than an institutionalized approach.
Not individualized, but intersectional. That's what Erlum taught me. So working with different groups that believe in the same thing as you, and they go through different struggles, but they're willing to fight to make sure that they're being heard, to make sure that their rights are being granted.
Yeah, I heard before you say that you want to become an organizer of youth groups, right? Like facilitators of communication among groups, and that's the way you think you can deconstruct politics, because what politics try to do is to separate us by labeling us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so after college, I'm hoping to continue my studies in psychology and work with children. That's my first interest, to see how the conflict affects children who are growing up in Palestine, and how that affects their social skills, their their cognitive skills. So that's my first interest. The second thing is I also want to work with youth groups, not necessarily an organizer, but it's more of like community outreach to see if certain programs can be started for the youth, because I think there's not enough opportunity for them to explore what they like. Soccer is one outlet for a lot of kids, but there's not many other things like cinema or music. It exists, but not for every child. So music, cinema, acting, things that will make them explore their interests rather than having one certain thing imposed on them all their life. Because that way they're going to find themselves lost in college. What should I study? My parents are telling me to be a doctor, but all my life has been about politics, but I also want to learn music. What if that's my interest? So having the dignity of choosing your own interests, I think, is something I'm interested in.
What was the life of a youth in Palestine like? You said it was in prison, and you didn't have exposure to
Yeah, I mean, there's no freedom of movement, so that's one thing. You can't really move from one city to another city. You all have IDs. It's very similar to a prison system, I think. You can't really fly into Palestine. You have to fly into another country and then cross a border with 3 different governments checking you and checking your bags. There's certain years when I was growing up where there was a curfew at night, you can't leave the house, or sometimes it would be for days. Soldiers can freely walk into your house and search the whole place and destroy it as well. You have no power over your life or the way you want to protect your family or your kids. You don't even have the privilege of, if a kid sees his dad that, he got hit by a soldier, and then the soldier is walking into the house, he pushed your mom out of the way, he can do whatever. You're already feeling that you don't have that sort of independence, you and your family, you don't have that. You're under the power and permission of someone else. And with simple movement, with ID cards, certain places that you can't go to